It was a cold, brisk morning in downtown Los Angeles. The streets were bustling with people, each wrapped up in their own world, hurrying to meetings, rushing to get coffee, or simply trying to survive the daily grind. Outside a Starbucks, a man stood, his face weathered by time and the harshness of life. His name was Tom, but to the world, he was just another homeless man, another face lost in the crowd. Tom wasn't used to asking for help. He had once had a life. He had a family, a job, a place to call home. But that was before the choices, the bad breaks, and the days when it all seemed to spiral out of control. He stood there now, shivering slightly, his hand outstretched as he asked anyone who passed by, "Can you spare $1?" Most people ignored him. Some gave him a quick glance, then quickly averted their eyes, as if the simple act of acknowledging his existence might somehow force them to confront the truth they didn't want to face. Others shook their heads, muttering an apologetic sorry before continuing on their way. Tom didn't take it personally anymore. He knew what he was to them, just another shadow on the streets. But then, something different happened. A man, a familiar face in a black leather jacket and sunglasses, walked toward the entrance of the Starbucks. Tom had seen him in the movies. He had seen him in almost every action film from his youth. It was Keanu Reeves, the actor. Tom's heart skipped a beat. In his world, Keanu was a god, someone who seemed untouchable, someone who lived in a world far away from Tom's. Keanu approached the door, and without thinking, Tom called out, "Excuse me, sir. Can you spare $1?" Keanu stopped in his tracks. He looked down at Tom, his expression unreadable behind those dark sunglasses. For a moment, there was silence. Tom felt the weight of his request hang in the air, unsure if Keanu would even acknowledge him, let alone respond. But then, Keanu did something that shocked Tom to his core. He didn't just toss him $1 and move on. He took a step closer, crouching down slightly so they were at eye level. Keanu removed his sunglasses, and for a brief moment, Tom was stunned by the warmth in his eyes, the kindness in the simple gesture. "Tom," Keanu said, surprising him with the use of his name, "why do you only ask for $1? What is that going to do for you?" Tom blinked in disbelief. "How do you know my name?" he stammered, his mind racing. Was this some kind of joke? Or had he finally lost touch with reality? Keanu smiled softly, a half-smile that made him look more human than ever. "I know more than you think," he said, his voice calm, but with an undeniable depth to it. "You don't have to settle for just $1. You deserve more than that. What do you really want, Tom?" For a moment, Tom was speechless. No one had ever asked him that before. No one had ever stopped to think about his real needs, not just the immediate ones, but the deeper ones, the ones that went beyond a meal or a warm place to sleep. He suddenly felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. "Don't just ask for survival," Keanu continued. "Ask for something more. Ask for the chance to turn things around." Tom's chest tightened as he struggled to find the words. This wasn't what he had expected. $1? Yes, that was what he thought he was asking for. But this was something completely different. Keanu didn't offer money. Instead, he gave Tom a challenge. And in that challenge, something shifted. Tom couldn't place it, but he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in years: possibility. "Meet me tomorrow morning, same time," Keanu said, as he began to walk toward the door of the Starbucks. "I'll help you find your way." Tom stood frozen, unsure if what had just happened was real. He glanced at Keanu as he disappeared into the warm glow of the coffee shop, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Could it be? Could he really change? Could Keanu Reeves, be the one to help him? Before he could even begin to process it, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Hey, are you okay?" A woman was standing nearby, looking at him with concern. She had been watching the whole exchange, her eyes wide with disbelief. Tom nodded slowly. He wasn't sure what just happened, but somehow, everything felt different now. "Yeah," he said quietly, his voice cracking slightly. I think I might be okay." Tom had never imagined his life would turn out this way. He had once been a different man, ambitious, hopeful, and with a family he loved. He had grown up in a small town in Texas, The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, where people took care of each other. His parents were hardworking, and they taught him the value of a good job, a home, and most importantly, family. For years, Tom had followed that path. He had worked as a contractor, building houses, fixing things, always staying busy. His wife, Sarah, was the love of his life. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and together, they formed a picture-perfect family. Tom was proud of what he had built. He had everything he thought he ever wanted. But life, as it often does, threw a curveball. It started with a series of unfortunate events. First, the company he worked for went under, a victim of the economy's ups and downs. Then Sarah, once the anchor in his life, began to pull away. Their marriage started to crumble under the weight of financial stress and unspoken resentments. The late nights, the arguments, the growing distance, it all became too much. One day, Sarah left, taking the kids with her, and that was the end of the life Tom had known. His world fell apart. For a while, he couldn't bring himself to do anything. He moved from apartment to apartment, hoping for stability, but it never came. He lost his job. His friends drifted away. He couldn't find the strength to get back on his feet. Every day felt like the weight of the world was pressing him down, and he had no idea how to rise again. Eventually, Tom found himself on the streets. It was a slow and painful descent, but it happened nonetheless. The years of hard work and dreams of a future were gone. Now, he was just another man trying to survive. But survival wasn't easy. It never had been. Tom learned to beg for change, to scrape by day. There were nights when he had to sleep on benches, under bridges, or in alleyways, trying to shield himself from the cold. He learned the faces of other homeless people, their stories, their pain. He made fleeting connections, but no one really understood him, and he didn't understand them either. He was trapped in a cycle of loneliness and hopelessness, each day feeling like the same as the last. And yet, there was always a part of him that refused to give up completely. It was a small spark, buried deep inside, but it never fully died. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when Tom remembered what it was like to dream. He remembered the feeling of hope, of having a future worth fighting for. But those moments were often overshadowed by the overwhelming weight of his circumstances. Tom tried to hold on to the memory of who he once was, the man who loved his family and built his life with his own hands. He missed his kids, Jack and Emma, more than anything in the world. He could still hear their laughter in his mind, their tiny voices calling for him. But it had been years since he had seen them, and he couldn't shake the guilt of his failures. He had tried to reach out to Sarah, sending her letters and messages, but there had been no response. It was as if he no longer existed in their world. They were gone, and he was left with nothing but memories of what could have been. Tom didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want to be the man standing outside begging for $1. But he didn't know how to ask for anything else. Every day was a battle, and it felt like the world was against him. That was until today. Today was different. Tom couldn't explain it, but something inside him had shifted after meeting Keanu Reeves. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone had acknowledged him. Not just as a homeless man, but as a human being. Keanu had seen him, really seen him, and that small gesture, asking Tom what he really wanted, had cracked open a door inside Tom that he thought was long shut. He thought about it as he sat on the curb, his hand still outstretched, the faint hope lingering in his chest. Was it possible? Could he really change? Could he rebuild the life he once had? Or was he too far gone? Tom didn't have the answers, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: possibility. As the hours passed and the sun began to set, Tom walked aimlessly through the streets, his thoughts swirling. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if Keanu would actually show up or if this was just a one-time encounter. But for the first time in years, Tom allowed himself to hope, just a little. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Keanu Reeves was an enigma to the world. To millions of fans, he was a hero, a star who had graced the silver screen in iconic roles like The Matrix, John Wick, and Speed. His calm demeanor, piercing eyes, and unforgettable performances made him one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood. But beyond the fame, beyond the red carpets and flashing cameras, Keanu was someone entirely different, a man who had known personal tragedy and deep loss, and yet remained remarkably humble and grounded. Keanu's life had never been as glamorous as the movies made it seem. Born in Beirut, Lebanon, to an English mother and an American father, he spent much of his childhood moving from place to place. His parents divorced when he was young, and Keanu grew up in Toronto, Canada, where he was a shy, introverted child. He found solace in the arts, particularly in acting, where he could escape into different worlds, playing characters who were braver, stronger, and more confident than he ever felt. His rise to fame came swiftly, but it wasn't without its challenges. Early in his career, Keanu was often underestimated and typecast. His calm, understated approach to acting didn't always align with Hollywood's expectations of a typical leading man. But it wasn't long before his breakout role in The Matrix catapulted him into global stardom. The film's success made him a household name, and his portrayal of Neo, the reluctant hero, resonated deeply with audiences. Yet, despite the immense fame, Keanu never seemed to be someone who reveled in the spotlight. Behind the scenes, Keanu's life was filled with both heartbreak and profound personal struggles. In 1999, just a few years after the success of The Matrix, Keanu experienced the devastating loss of his close friend, River Phoenix. River's sudden death from a drug overdose left Keanu reeling, and it was a loss that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Keanu had known River since they were both young actors, and the bond they shared was one of deep friendship and mutual respect. River's passing made Keanu reevaluate his own life and purpose. But the tragedies didn't stop there. In 2001, Keanu's girlfriend, Jennifer Syme, was tragically killed in a car accident. They had been in a relationship for a few years, and their plans to start a family together were shattered in an instant. Jennifer's death was particularly painful for Keanu, as they had just lost their child during pregnancy not long before the accident. Keanu retreated further into solitude, finding it difficult to cope with the grief. Despite all the pain, Keanu never sought the public sympathy or attention. Instead, he became known for his quiet, humble nature. He was often spotted riding public transportation, walking around town without security, and living in modest apartments. Keanu was someone who avoided the trappings of Hollywood excess, preferring to live a life of simplicity. He gave away millions of dollars to charity, anonymously donating large sums to children's hospitals and cancer research. His generosity and kindness were well known, though rarely talked about. To the outside world, Keanu's decision to live a humble life amidst wealth and fame seemed like an anomaly, but to those who knew him, it made perfect sense. Keanu had seen firsthand how fleeting fame could be. He understood the pain of loss, the emptiness that sometimes accompanied success, and the importance of human connection. Through it all, Keanu kept his heart open and his mind focused on helping others. That's why, when he saw Tom standing outside the Starbucks, something deep within Keanu stirred. It wasn't the usual pity or casual sympathy that most people felt when they encountered someone struggling with homelessness. No, Keanu saw something else in Tom, something he recognized from his own life. Tom was more than just a man asking for $1. He was someone who had lost something precious and was desperately trying to find a way back. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the chance. Keanu had been in Tom's shoes, though in a different form. He, too, had once struggled to find meaning in the aftermath of loss. He knew what it felt like to be at rock bottom, to question one's worth and purpose. And he knew how powerful it could be to be seen, to be understood, and to be given a second chance. So, when Keanu approached Tom and asked him what he really wanted, when he spoke those words that shocked Tom, he wasn't just offering help. He was offering an opportunity, a chance for Tom to rebuild his life. Keanu wasn't looking for gratitude or praise. He wasn't trying to prove a point to the world. He was simply reaching out, as someone who had been lost before and knew how hard it could be to find a way back. That day, Keanu wasn't just a famous actor. He was a man who, despite his fame and fortune, had learned some of life's hardest lessons. And in that moment, he knew that by helping someone else, he could make a real difference. Keanu was more than just a Hollywood star. He was a man who understood that sometimes, the best thing you can do for someone is to believe in them, to remind them that there's always a way forward, even when the road ahead seems impossible. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Tom needed most of all. A reminder that it wasn't too late to change. The next morning, as the sun began to rise over Los Angeles, Tom found himself standing outside the Starbucks again, exactly where he had been the day before. He had spent the night turning over everything that had happened in his mind, replaying Keanu's words over and over. "Meet me tomorrow morning, same time." Tom wasn't sure if Keanu would really show up. Maybe it had been a moment of kindness, an act of impulse. Perhaps Keanu had just felt sorry for him. But as the minutes ticked by and the familiar faces of the morning rushed past him by, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that this was something different. He felt something inside him stirring, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Hope. When the clock struck 9 a.m., Tom stood at the edge of the sidewalk, scanning the faces of people walking past. There were no signs of Keanu yet, but Tom couldn't bring himself to leave. Maybe this wasn't about the meeting at all. Maybe it was about taking the first step, believing that things could change. And then, just as Tom's doubts began to creep in, he saw him. Keanu Reeves walked down the street, just like yesterday, casually, without any entourage or cameras. He was dressed in a simple gray jacket, jeans, and a pair of sneakers. His sunglasses were perched atop his head, and there was an almost serene calm about him as he approached the Starbucks. He didn't seem rushed or preoccupied, but instead focused on Tom, as if he had all the time in the world. Tom's heart skipped a beat. Could this really be happening? Keanu walked up to him with a small smile, the same quiet warmth in his eyes. "Hey, Tom," he said. "I'm glad to see you here. You ready to talk?" For a moment, Tom didn't know what to say. He had been preparing himself for this meeting, but now that it was happening, he felt a wave of nerves flood over him. What was he supposed to say? He wasn't used to people showing this kind of attention, especially someone like Keanu Reeves. Tom managed a hesitant nod. I didn't think you'd show up, but I'm here." He laughed softly, almost to himself. "I guess I didn't really expect this." Keanu chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "I understand, but sometimes the most unexpected things can turn out to be the most important." Tom looked down at the ground, feeling both embarrassed and strangely grateful. "I don't know where to start," he admitted. Keanu tilted his head thoughtfully, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to start anywhere. Just start with where you are right now. Tell me about your life. What's been going on, Tom? I'm here to listen." For a moment, Tom hesitated. His life, the life he had fallen into, felt like a weight too heavy to share with anyone. But Keanu's calm presence, his genuine interest, made it feel like it was okay to open up. I used to have everything," Tom began, his voice quiet. "A family, a house, a job. Everything was fine. But one thing after another, it just fell apart. My wife left. My kids. I haven't seen them in years. I lost my job, and after that, it felt like I lost myself. I ended up on the streets, asking for change, trying to get by." Tom's voice cracked, the weight of his own words hitting him harder than he expected. Keanu didn't interrupt, just letting Tom speak. "There's nothing left of the man I used to be," Tom continued, his voice growing stronger. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. I'm stuck, and every day feels like the same thing." Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "I hear you, Tom. I really do," he said softly. "But I want you to know something. It's not too late. You haven't lost everything. You may have lost your family, your job, and your way of life, but you haven't lost your ability to change. That's still inside you." Tom looked at Keanu, disbelief in his eyes. "How do you know that? How do you know anything about me?" Keanu smiled, his eyes thoughtful. "I know because I've been where you are. I've lost people I loved, faced grief I thought I'd never get through. But the difference is, I didn't give up. I kept moving forward, even when it felt impossible." Tom's chest tightened. He had heard of Keanu's personal tragedies, the loss of his friend River Phoenix, his girlfriend Jennifer, and their unborn child. In the tabloids, they painted Keanu's story as one of loss and solitude, but hearing him speak about it, hearing the quiet strength in his voice, made Tom realize that Keanu truly understood. "Don't get me wrong," Keanu continued, It's not easy. But the first step is always the hardest one. It's about finding something to hold on to, something to believe in. It could be a small thing, a goal, a dream, anything. But you can't give up, Tom. Not now. Tom felt a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to believe. He really did. But he was scared. Scared that if he tried and failed, it would only hurt more. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a small business card. He handed it to Tom. This is for a group I work with. They help people rebuild their lives, get back on their feet. You don't have to do this alone. If you want to take that first step, this is where you start. Tom took the card, his hands trembling. You really think I can do this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu looked at him with quiet determination. I know you can, but you have to make the choice. You're the one who has to take that first step. I can help guide you, but only you can decide to move forward. Tom stared at the card in his hand. For the first time in years, he felt like there was something worth reaching for. He wasn't sure if he had the strength yet, but hearing Keanu say it, believing in him, made him feel like it was possible. Okay, Tom said, his voice steadying. I'll do it. I'll try. Keanu smiled warmly. That's all anyone can do. Try. I'll be here for you, Tom, every step of the way. And just like that, something in Tom shifted. For the first time, he had someone who believed in him. It wasn't about money or charity. It was about giving him a chance to believe in himself again. As Keanu turned to walk away, Tom watched him disappear into the crowd. But this time, he didn't feel alone. He felt like the world, for once, might actually be on his side. The days that followed the encounter with Keanu were a blur of emotions for Tom. He held on to that moment like a lifeline, the kind of lifeline he hadn't had in years. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt seen. Not just as a homeless man begging for spare change, but as a person with a story, a past, and, maybe, some hope for a future. Keanu's words echoed in his mind. You haven't lost everything. You haven't lost your ability to change. But change was hard, and Tom had forgotten just how difficult it could be. The first step was the hardest. Tom had never been one to ask for help. Even now, with Keanu's encouragement and the business card in his hand, he couldn't shake the feeling of embarrassment. Reaching out felt like admitting defeat, like confirming to the world that he couldn't handle things on his own. Yet, deep down, he knew that if he didn't try, he would be stuck in the same place forever. So, the next morning, he went to the address on the card. It was a small, modest building on a quiet street in downtown Los Angeles, nestled between an old bookstore and a laundromat. The sign above the door read, Second Chance Community Outreach. Tom hesitated before pushing the door open. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he could already feel the weight of judgment pressing down on him. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. Maybe a warm welcome. Maybe a room full of people who had been through the same things. But all he could focus on was the pounding in his head, the voice telling him that he didn't belong here, that he was just wasting his time. When he walked in, a woman behind the counter looked up and smiled warmly. Can I help you? She asked, her voice kind but direct. Tom cleared his throat, his palms clammy. I was given this card, he said, holding it out in front of him. Keanu Reeves, he said you could help me. The woman raised an eyebrow, but her smile didn't fade. Keanu sent you, huh? That's a first. She leaned forward. Come on in, sit down. Let me get you some coffee. You're not the first person he's sent here, and you won't be the last. Tom followed her into a small waiting area. The place wasn't fancy. It was simple, clean, with posters on the wall that read things like, everyone deserves a second chance, and the road to recovery starts with a single step. As Tom sat down and sipped the coffee she handed him, the reality of his situation started to settle in. This wasn't going to be easy. The path ahead was not some magical solution. It was going to require work, patience, and persistence. He couldn't expect everything to change overnight. But as he sat there, staring at the coffee cup in his hands, doubts began to creep in. Was he really capable of making a change? What if this was just another false hope? What if he failed? Tom had spent so many years in survival mode, simply getting by day to day, that the idea of rebuilding his life felt almost impossible. He had never been one to ask for help, never been one to trust that things could get better. And now, with everything hanging in the balance, he felt the weight of that old fear creeping back into his chest. His thoughts were interrupted by the woman who had greeted him. She walked over with a folder in her hand, sitting down next to him. "All right, Tom, here's the deal. We've got a program here. It's a 6-month recovery program to help people get back on their feet, housing, job training, support groups, therapy. It's not going to be easy, but if you're committed, we'll help you every step of the way." Tom looked up at her, his heart pounding. 6 months? He repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't have 6 months. I can't just wait around. I need something now." The woman nodded understandingly. "I get it, but change doesn't happen overnight. If you want lasting change, you have to be willing to put in the work. It's not about a quick fix. It's about building something new, piece by piece." Tom swallowed hard. The idea of 6 months felt like an eternity, and the thought of waiting that long for a better life made him feel even more desperate. But as he sat there, listening to the woman's calm voice, something inside him shifted. She was right. Change didn't happen quickly. There would be setbacks, frustrations, and moments where everything felt impossible. But if he didn't try, if he didn't take that first step, he was guaranteed to stay exactly where he was. "I'll do it," Tom said, surprising himself. "I'll commit to the program." The woman smiled and handed him a stack of forms. "Good. You won't regret it, Tom. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're here to support you." As Tom left the building that day, a mix of emotions swirled inside him. There was relief. He had taken the first step, but there was also fear, uncertainty, and the nagging feeling that he wasn't strong enough to see this through. He knew that the road ahead would be full of obstacles. The world wouldn't make it easy for him. People would judge him, doubt him, and the old demons of self-doubt would rise up every time he tried to move forward. But there was something else too. The tiny spark of hope Keanu had awakened within him, the belief that maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild his life, piece by piece. That evening, Tom stood in front of a small shelter, feeling a pang of sadness for the man he had been. The one who had given up on his dreams, on himself. But for the first time, he didn't feel completely lost. He knew that he had a long way to go, but he also knew that he had already taken the hardest step. As the sun set behind him, Tom made a promise to himself. He would see this through. He would fight for his second chance, no matter how difficult it became. After all, Keanu had believed in him, and maybe that was all he needed to believe in himself. The first few days of the program were a whirlwind. Tom showed up early every morning, eager to prove to himself, and to everyone around him, that he was committed to making a change. He went through the orientation, signed the paperwork, and listened attentively to the counselors and mentors who explained the structure of the recovery program. The place wasn't luxurious, but there was a sense of community that made Tom feel like he wasn't as alone as he had been before. But despite his initial determination, the reality of what lay ahead quickly began to set in. The program was grueling. It wasn't just about finding a job or getting a place to live. It was about breaking down the walls he had built around himself over the years, facing the pain he had tried to bury, and doing the hard work to rebuild his life from the ground up. The first obstacle was the daily routine. Tom had spent so many years in survival mode that structure felt foreign to him. He was used to waking up whenever he felt like it, wandering the streets, and finding whatever food or shelter he could. Now, he had to follow a strict schedule, early morning meetings, therapy sessions, group activities, job readiness workshops. At first, it felt suffocating. There were mornings when he wanted to turn around and leave, when he thought to himself, "This is too much. I'm not cut out for this. I can't do it." But each time he felt like giving up, he remembered Keanu's words, "You haven't lost your ability to change." The next challenge came in the form of the therapy sessions. The counselor, a woman named Laura, was kind but direct. She pushed Tom to confront the deep-seated pain he had been carrying for years, the loss of his family, the years spent on the streets, the guilt he carried for not being able to provide for his children. It was during one of these sessions that Tom found himself in tears for the first time in a long while. He hadn't cried in years, not since the day his wife had left him. The flood of emotions caught him off guard, and for a moment, he felt embarrassed. But Laura just sat there, silent, waiting for him to let it out. "You're carrying a lot of weight, Tom," she said softly once the tears stopped. "It's okay to let it go. You don't have to carry it anymore. But it won't be easy. Healing takes time." Tom wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket, feeling a mixture of relief and shame. Healing? It felt impossible. How could he heal the wounds of a lifetime? After that session, Tom spent hours walking the streets, wrestling with his thoughts. It wasn't just the pain of losing his family. It was the guilt of feeling like he had let them down. The memory of his wife's disappointed face when she walked out, the look in his children's eyes when they saw him for the last time. It haunted him. He had failed them, and that failure had defined him ever since. But as he walked, something shifted. He wasn't sure if it was the therapy session or the quiet encouragement from the people at the program, but the walls he had built around his heart began to crack. Maybe, just maybe, he could forgive himself. Maybe he could start over. The next few weeks were a blur of ups and downs. Tom continued to attend the therapy sessions, participating in group discussions, and working through job readiness training. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of doubt, moments when he thought the program wasn't going to work, moments when he wanted to quit. One afternoon, after a particularly tough job interview simulation, Tom sat alone in the break room, staring at the table in front of him. He had failed the mock interview miserably. His nerves had gotten the best of him, and he could feel the frustration building up inside him. What's the point of all this? He thought. I'll never be good enough to get a real job. I'm not even sure I'm good enough for this program. Just then, the door to the break room opened and Laura walked in. She could see the look on his face. He was defeated. "Hey, Tom," she said gently, sitting down across from him. "What's going on?" Tom didn't answer at first. He just stared at the table, his hands clenched into fists. "You want to talk about it?" Laura asked after a moment of silence. "I'm just tired of failing," Tom said quietly, his voice full of frustration. "I thought I could do this, but every time I try, I screw up. I'm never going to be able to get back on my feet. I don't even know why I'm here anymore." Laura didn't try to talk him out of it, didn't give him empty words of encouragement. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the weight of what he was feeling. "You know, Tom, nobody here is expecting you to be perfect. You're not failing. You're just learning, and learning takes time. You're trying to do something you've never done before, and that's hard. But that doesn't mean you're not making progress." Tom sighed, feeling the exhaustion in his bones. "I just don't know if I can keep going. What if I'm not cut out for this?" Laura smiled softly. "You're already here. You've already taken more steps than most people ever do. Keep going, one day at a time." As Tom sat there, listening to Laura's words, a flicker of understanding passed through him. It wasn't about getting everything right on the first try. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying, and trying again, and again, until, one day, the pieces started to come together. It was hard. There were still days when Tom doubted himself, when he wanted to give up. But slowly, he started to realize something important. He wasn't alone in this. There were people who cared, people who believed in him, even when he couldn't believe in himself. And as much as he had feared failure, he realized that failure wasn't the end. It was just a part of the journey. It had been a month since Tom joined the program, and while there were moments of progress, it still felt like an uphill battle. The familiar weight of doubt and fear never fully left him. Some mornings, he woke up feeling like he was making strides, and by the afternoon, the fatigue of his past would bear down on him again. But there were moments, small moments, that made all the struggle feel a little bit more worth it. The first of those moments came unexpectedly. One evening, after finishing a therapy session, Tom was walking back to the shelter when he spotted a young man sitting alone at a park bench. He was holding a crumpled sign that read, "Hungry, please help." Tom stopped in his tracks. For a moment, he just stared at the man, and the realization hit him hard. It was him. He was looking at the person he used to be, the person he had been for so long. The desperation in that man's eyes was the same as the one he saw in the mirror every morning. Without thinking, Tom walked over to him. "Hey," he said softly, unsure of what to say, but feeling an overwhelming urge to connect. You don't have to do this alone. The young man looked up at him, eyes filled with skepticism. Who are you? He asked, his voice rough. Tom hesitated, then sat down beside him. I know what it's like to be out here, Tom said quietly. I used to sit on a bench just like this, asking for change, feeling like nobody cared. But I'm not there anymore. The young man gave him a skeptical look, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a spark of curiosity. What do you mean? I'm in a program, Tom explained. It's for people who want to get back on their feet. I've been there, man. I know what it's like to feel stuck, but you don't have to stay there. You can change. The young man looked at Tom, still unsure. Sounds too good to be true, he muttered. Tom nodded. I get it. I didn't believe it either. But trust me, it's real. It's not easy, but if you want to get out of this, there are people who want to help. The young man stayed silent for a moment, and Tom could see the inner conflict in his eyes. Maybe he was skeptical, maybe he wasn't ready to make a change, but Tom could see something in him, the same spark that Keanu had seen in Tom. Look, Tom continued, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if you want it, you can have a second chance too. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm here to help if you want it. The young man didn't say anything for a while, just stared at the ground, clearly lost in thought. Finally, he nodded slowly. Maybe, he said quietly, I'll think about it. Tom stood up, feeling a sense of quiet pride in himself. Maybe he wasn't exactly where he wanted to be, but he was on his way. He had gone from the man asking for change to someone who could offer it to someone else. That shift, however small, felt like a victory. The next breakthrough came when Tom attended his first job readiness workshop. The facilitator, a woman named Jenna, was energetic and passionate about helping people develop the skills they needed to get back into the workforce. The first part of the session was about building a resume, something Tom had never done before. As Jenna went over the basics, Tom realized how much he had to learn. He didn't have a resume, a cover letter, or any formal work experience to put down. His last job had been years ago, and even then, it was nothing impressive. He could feel the weight of inadequacy pulling him down as Jenna asked everyone to start drafting their resumes. But instead of succumbing to his frustration, Tom pushed through. With a deep breath, he started writing. It was basic, just a list of skills, the few jobs he had worked before everything fell apart, and his desire to learn more. He wasn't sure it was enough, but it was a start. That afternoon, Jenna pulled him aside. Tom, I can see you're struggling with this, she said, her tone kind but direct. But don't sell yourself short. You've got skills, valuable skills. You've survived out here for a reason, and you've learned things that most people will never understand. That's more than enough. Tom was surprised by her words. He had always seen his time on the streets as a failure, a waste. But Jenna's words made him pause. Maybe there was something he could offer, something beyond what he saw in the mirror every day. I've learned how to survive, Tom said, almost to himself. Exactly, Jenna said, nodding. Survival takes a lot of skills, problem-solving, resourcefulness, patience. You've got those, Tom, and you're here now learning. That's the key. Tom left the session that day with a new sense of possibility. Maybe he wasn't starting from scratch after all. He had learned things along the way, things that could be valuable to someone else. He had just never seen them that way. The final breakthrough came one morning, when Tom was sitting in the park, going over his resume again, trying to figure out how to phrase the skills he had. As he sat there, a man in a suit approached him. Tom looked up, startled. Excuse me, the man said. Are you Tom? Tom nodded warily. Yeah, that's me. Who are you? My name's Mark, the man said, holding out his hand. I'm a recruiter, and I work with a local company. We're hiring, and I've been looking for someone with your experience. Tom blinked, confused. My experience? Mark smiled. Your resume caught my eye. I know it's a little unconventional, but you've got skills I can use. We've been looking for someone like you. Someone who's resourceful, someone who knows how to handle pressure. Would you be interested in a job? Tom's mouth went dry. This was it. This was the moment he had been working toward, the moment he had almost given up on. I don't know what to say, Tom said, stunned. You don't have to say anything right now, Mark said, smiling warmly. But think about it. We could really use someone like you. As Mark walked away, Tom sat frozen for a few moments, trying to process what had just happened. Could this be real? Was this really happening? For the first time in years, Tom felt a wave of optimism wash over him. He wasn't there yet. He still had a long way to go. But he had taken another step forward. A real, tangible step. Small strides, but strides nonetheless. The job offer had caught Tom off guard, but as the days went on, it became more and more real. Mark from the recruiting firm had followed through, and before Tom knew it, he was standing outside a modest office building downtown, suit in hand, ready for his first day on the job. It wasn't a dream job, not by a long shot. It was a warehouse position, entry-level, and the pay wasn't anything to write home about. But it was a job, an honest, steady job with regular hours, a paycheck, and, most importantly, a chance to prove to himself that he could succeed. Tom stood at the entrance for a few moments, taking in the sight of the building. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. What if he couldn't keep up? What if the people there judged him for his past? What if they found out where he'd come from and decided he wasn't good enough? But then, he remembered the small victories. Everything he had overcome just to get here. The progress, no matter how small, was real. He wasn't the same man who had begged for change on the streets. He had something now, hope. Taking a deep breath, Tom pushed the door open and stepped inside. The first few days were a blur. The work was physically demanding, but that didn't scare Tom. He was used to hard labor, used to pushing himself past exhaustion. What challenged him the most were the social dynamics of the office. It wasn't the work itself, it was the people. At first, his coworkers didn't know what to make of him. Tom wasn't sure how to explain his past, but it wasn't something he wanted to bring up anyway. The walls between him and everyone else felt thick, and the uncertainty of his place in this world of normal jobs, routines, and responsibilities made him question whether he truly belonged. During breaks, Tom sat in the corner, keeping to himself, unsure how to connect with anyone. The conversation seemed so foreign to him. Sports, weekend plans, family drama. It felt like they were speaking another language. But there was one person who reached out. Her name was Sarah. She was a manager at the warehouse, and although she was a few years younger than Tom, she exuded confidence and kindness. Tom wasn't sure why she paid him any attention at first. Maybe because she could see how much he was struggling to fit in. Or maybe because she had an innate ability to make others feel welcome. One afternoon, during a short break, Sarah walked over to him with a cup of coffee. "Hey, Tom," she said, sitting down across from him. "How's it going? Settling in okay?" Tom looked up from his coffee, a bit surprised. "Yeah, it's fine. Just trying to get the hang of everything." "I get it," Sarah said with a smile. "It's a lot to take in at first, especially if you haven't worked in a while. But you're doing great." Tom shrugged. "I'm just trying to keep up." "You're doing more than keeping up," Sarah replied. "You're doing well, and we appreciate the work you're putting in. It's not easy." The unexpected encouragement made Tom feel uncomfortable at first. He wasn't used to being praised, at least, not for anything meaningful, but he could feel something shift inside him. Maybe he did have something to offer. Maybe he could do this. As the weeks passed, Sarah's support helped him to open up more to his coworkers. It wasn't instantaneous, but he slowly started joining in on conversations. Little by little, the walls he had built around himself began to crumble. He was still haunted by his past, by the family he had lost, the mistakes he had made, but at least, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. And as the days went by, he realized that he didn't have to go back to the life he once knew. There was still a long way to go, but he was on the path. One Friday afternoon, after his shift, Sarah caught him before he could leave the warehouse. "Hey, Tom, got a minute?" Tom stopped and turned toward her. "Sure, what's up?" "I just wanted to let you know that we're considering you for a promotion," Sarah said, her eyes bright with sincerity. Tom blinked, his heart skipping a beat. "A promotion?" "Yeah, you've been doing great work, and we think you've got the potential to move up. It won't be official yet, but we're definitely keeping an eye on you." The words didn't fully register at first. He had to blink a few times to process what she was saying. A promotion? After everything he had been through? He felt a rush of emotions, disbelief, gratitude, but also a growing sense of pride. He hadn't just gotten by. He had earned something. Maybe not the world, maybe not everything he wanted, but something. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't expect that. Honestly." Sarah smiled warmly. "You've earned it. Just keep doing what you're doing. We believe in you." As Tom walked out of the building that evening, his mind was spinning. He had come so far in such a short amount of time. From the man who had once begged for $1 to the man who was now being considered for a promotion, he couldn't quite believe it. But as he stood there, looking out over the city, the weight of everything began to settle into place. He had learned something important. He didn't have to be defined by his past. He was capable of more than he had ever imagined. For the first time in years, Tom wasn't looking over his shoulder, fearing the next failure or setback. Instead, he was looking ahead, with cautious optimism. He was taking control of his life again, one small victory at a time. Tom's newfound sense of confidence was still fragile, and he knew that the road ahead wouldn't be without its bumps. But he wasn't prepared for what came next. It started out like any other Monday morning. He woke up early, dressed in his uniform, and made his way to the warehouse. The first few hours of his shift went smoothly. He worked with his usual focus, determined to keep proving to everyone, and to himself, that he was capable of more. But then, around lunchtime, the unthinkable happened. Tom was moving a heavy box when he misjudged the weight and lost his balance. The box crashed to the floor with a loud thud, the contents spilling out across the warehouse floor. Tom's heart sank as he looked around, realizing everyone had stopped to watch. He hadn't made such a mistake in weeks. He had been careful, too careful, maybe, and now this? The warehouse manager, a man named Dave, walked over, a look of frustration crossing his face. "Tom," Dave said, his voice tight with annoyance, "you need to be more careful. This is the third time this week." Tom felt a flush of embarrassment spread across his face. It wasn't like him to mess up, especially in front of everyone. He bent down to start cleaning up the mess, trying to ignore the sting of failure. But Dave's voice was firm as he spoke again. "I'm going to have to talk to Sarah about this. We can't afford to have mistakes like this piling up." A cold knot formed in Tom's stomach. A part of him wanted to argue, to explain that he had been doing his best, but another part of him already knew that it wasn't going to change anything. In that moment, he felt the walls closing in around him again. The familiar weight of failure began to press down on him, and all the progress he had made seemed to disappear in an instant. Later that afternoon, Sarah found him alone in the break room. She didn't look angry, but there was a seriousness in her eyes. "Tom," she started, her voice gentle but firm, "I need to talk to you about what happened earlier." Tom's stomach twisted. He knew this conversation was coming. He had let everyone down. "I'm really sorry," Tom said quickly, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't know what happened. I just misjudged it. I was being too careless." Sarah nodded, her expression softening. "I know you're trying your best, but mistakes like this could put a strain on things. I don't want you to think we don't value you, because we do. But we need to see improvement, Tom. This can't keep happening." Tom swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand. I'll do better. I promise." But in the back of his mind, doubt began to creep in. What if this was it? What if one mistake really could cost him everything? The fear was overwhelming, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like he was back at square one, like he hadn't made any progress at all. That evening, Tom sat alone in his room at the shelter, staring at the walls. He felt completely deflated. How could I have been so careless? He had spent so much time trying to build himself up, only to watch it all come crashing down in a single moment. It felt like the universe was reminding him of his past failures. Every mistake, every misstep, every missed opportunity. The echo of his old self, the man who had made countless mistakes and never believed in second chances, came rushing back. He thought about the days when he had been on the streets, when failure had felt inevitable. How many times had he tried and failed? How many times had he been too afraid to try at all? As he sat there, the weight of his self-doubt threatened to consume him. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm destined to fail no matter what I do. But then, something inside him shifted. He thought back to the conversation he'd had with Sarah, to her kind words, her belief in him. You've earned it. Just keep doing what you're doing. We believe in you. Sarah didn't think he was a failure. She hadn't given up on him yet. Maybe he shouldn't give up on himself, either. The next morning, Tom woke up determined to make things right. He couldn't undo his mistake, but he could control how he responded. He wasn't going to let this one setback define him. He wasn't going to let it drag him back to the place he had been before, broken and defeated. At work that day, Tom kept his head down and focused on the tasks at hand. When he made another mistake during the shift, this time a smaller one, he didn't let it throw him off. Instead of sinking into the familiar shame, he took a deep breath, acknowledged the mistake, and moved on. During lunch, Sarah pulled him aside again, but this time, her tone was different. Tom, she said, looking at him with a kind but serious expression, I noticed you didn't let the earlier mistake get to you. That's progress. I know you're still adjusting, and I want you to know that we're not expecting perfection. We just need to see that you're learning. Tom looked up at her, feeling a weight lift off his chest. Thanks, he said quietly. I'm doing my best. I don't want to let you down. Sarah smiled, her expression softening. You're doing just fine, Tom. Just keep going. Mistakes happen, but what matters is how you respond. Keep showing up, keep working hard, and things will get better. That conversation, though simple, meant more to Tom than he could express. It reminded him that everyone made mistakes, and that failure didn't have to be the end of the road. It could be a lesson, a chance to grow. And in that moment, Tom realized something important. Progress wasn't linear. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, learning, and not giving up. As the days went by, Tom continued to work hard and, little by little, he gained back the confidence he had momentarily lost. He still made mistakes, but each time, he learned something new. He began to feel more at home in the warehouse, more like he belonged. And while he knew there would still be setbacks ahead, he was no longer afraid of them. Because every step forward, no matter how small, was still progress. For weeks, Tom had been slowly rebuilding his life, one small step at a time. The warehouse job had become a stable part of his routine, and though the work was physically demanding, he had grown comfortable with it. The other employees had started to warm up to him, and Sarah's mentorship had given him the encouragement he needed to keep going. But just as things seemed to settle into a rhythm, life threw him another challenge. This time, it wasn't about his work ethic or his past mistakes. It was about trust, the kind of trust that could make or break everything he had worked so hard for. It started when Sarah approached him one afternoon after his shift. Her face was more serious than usual, and there was an edge of urgency in her voice. Tom, she began, I need to talk to you about something important. Tom set down the box he was carrying, his stomach tightening. The last time Sarah had said those words, it was because he'd made a mistake. Was he about to lose everything again? Is something wrong? Tom asked, trying to keep his voice steady. There's been a situation with some inventory, Sarah said, her voice tight. A batch of supplies went missing, and we're not sure how. I need to ask you some questions. Tom's heart skipped a beat. Missing inventory? It felt like a slap in the face, something that could easily be pinned on someone. Could this be another mistake? Could he be blamed for something he didn't do? I don't understand, Tom said, trying to hold back the anxiety that was building in his chest. Are you saying I had something to do with it? No, Sarah said quickly, shaking her head. But I need to know who was working that night, and if anyone noticed anything unusual. Tom's mind raced. He had worked a late shift a few nights ago. Had he seen something that he didn't realize was important? He couldn't remember. All he could think about was how easily things could spiral out of control. He had worked so hard to earn the trust of everyone around him. Could this be the moment that shattered everything? I didn't notice anything, Tom said, his voice quiet. But I'll do whatever I can to help figure this out. Sarah studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. I know you would, Tom, she said finally. But this situation is bigger than just a missing box. There are people here who are starting to ask questions. There's pressure from the higher-ups. Tom nodded, understanding the gravity of what was being said. This wasn't just about him. This was about the entire team, the entire warehouse. If the missing inventory wasn't found quickly, heads would roll, and he couldn't afford to let that happen. But there was something else nagging at him. He knew the people he worked with, and he knew that, like in any workplace, there were individuals who would throw others under the bus to protect themselves. What if someone in the warehouse, someone who knew about his past, decided to take advantage of the situation? What if they framed him for something he didn't do? I don't know who else might have seen something, Tom said, his voice wavering slightly, but I'll keep my eyes open. I don't want anyone to think I'm part of this. I know, Tom, Sarah said, her voice softening. I don't think you are. But I need to ask you something else. Do you trust me? The question caught Tom off guard. Of course, he trusted Sarah. She had believed in him when no one else had. She had helped him when he was at his lowest. But this was different. This wasn't about belief. This was about something much bigger. I do, Tom said quietly. I trust you. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. I need you to know that whatever happens, I'm going to stand by you. I'll vouch for you if it comes down to it. But you need to be completely honest with me, okay? If there's anything you know, anything at all, you need to tell me now. I need to know I can trust you, too. Tom's chest tightened. Trust. He had spent so much of his life fighting to rebuild it, and now, here he was again, facing the very thing that could tear it all down. I'm not hiding anything, Tom said, trying to keep his voice steady. But I'll do whatever I can to help. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. Good, Sarah said, giving him a reassuring smile. I believe you. Just stay focused, okay? As Sarah walked away, Tom stood there, feeling the weight of the situation settle in his bones. He knew that this could go one of two ways. He could trust Sarah and stick to his principles, even if it meant putting himself at risk. Or he could keep his head down, stay quiet, and let someone else take the blame for the missing inventory. But Tom had come too far to let fear control him now. He had worked too hard to get to this point to let someone else's mistake define his future. The following days were tense. The investigation into the missing inventory dragged on, and rumors spread like wildfire throughout the warehouse. Some people pointed fingers at others, while others stayed quiet, hoping to avoid suspicion. Tom did his best to focus on his work, but it was hard to concentrate with the constant undercurrent of suspicion in the air. And then, just as things seemed to be coming to a head, Tom caught a break. He had been moving boxes in the storage room when he noticed something strange. A set of keys sitting on one of the shelves. They didn't look familiar. As he picked them up, a thought struck him. These were the keys to the back exit, an exit that wasn't supposed to be used without permission. Tom's heart raced. This was it, the clue that could prove his innocence. Without hesitation, he went straight to Sarah. I found something, Tom said, his voice shaking. I think it's important. Sarah looked at him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Tom handed her the keys, watching as she examined them. These are the keys to the back exit, Sarah said, her brow furrowing. This could be a big break. Do you know who they belong to? Tom shook his head. I don't, but they were on the shelf in the storage room. I don't think anyone else was supposed to have them. Sarah nodded, a plan forming in her mind. This could be the evidence we need. You've just made a huge difference, Tom. The discovery didn't immediately solve everything, but it shifted the investigation in the right direction. It wasn't long before the missing inventory was traced back to a careless mistake made by another employee, a person who had been sneaking in and out of the warehouse using the back exit. The pressure on Tom lifted, and the trust he had been so afraid of losing was solidified. As the dust settled, Sarah took Tom aside once again. I knew I could count on you, she said, smiling warmly. You did the right thing, even when it was hard. Tom felt a wave of relief wash over him. The test of trust had been harder than he expected, but in the end, he had passed. Not only had he proven his loyalty to Sarah, but he had also proven to himself that he could stand up for what was right, even when it seemed like everything was stacked against him. I didn't let you down, Tom said quietly, more to himself than to Sarah. No, she replied with a knowing smile. You didn't. And with that, Tom knew that he had truly found his place. It wasn't just in the warehouse. It was in the trust of those who believed in him, and in the knowledge that he could rise above any challenge. The weeks following the inventory investigation had been filled with a sense of quiet relief. Tom's role in uncovering the truth had not only solidified his position at the warehouse, but it also strengthened his bond with Sarah and the team. But as much as he had grown in this job, deep down, he knew that his journey wasn't over. There were still more obstacles to face, more lessons to learn, and more opportunities to seize. One morning, just as Tom was starting to settle into his routine, he received an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was one he instantly recognized. "Tom, it's Mark from the recruiting firm. I've got some news for you." Tom's heart raced. Mark hadn't reached out to him in weeks. Had something changed? Was this about another job? "What's up?" Tom asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've been keeping an eye on your progress, and there's a new opportunity that's come up. It's a management position at a logistics company that's expanding in the area. They're looking for someone with your work ethic and background to help lead a team." Tom blinked, processing the words. A management position? A chance to move up so quickly? He didn't know what to say. He had just started to feel comfortable at the warehouse. He had worked so hard to get here, and now someone was offering him a chance to leave? The opportunity was tempting, but it also felt like a leap into the unknown. "I don't know," Tom hesitated. "I mean, I'm grateful for the offer, but I've just started to settle in. I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that." Mark's voice was patient, understanding. "I get it. I wouldn't push you if I didn't think you were ready. But think about it. This is the kind of opportunity you've been working toward. You've proven yourself. Now you have a chance to take on more responsibility and grow into a leadership role." Tom's mind raced. He thought about the warehouse, his coworkers, Sarah. He had started to build something there, something solid. But could he really turn down a chance like this? Could he afford to pass up a shot at something more? "I need some time to think about it," Tom finally said, his voice low. "This is a big decision." "Of course," Mark replied. "Take all the time you need. But know that we believe in you, Tom. This could be your chance to make an even bigger impact." After the call ended, Tom sat in his small room at the shelter, staring at the walls. He had come so far since that day he had asked Keanu Reeves for $1. He had fought to rebuild his life. And now he had a real opportunity to build something even greater. The job at the warehouse had been a starting point, a way to regain his footing. But this was a chance to make a difference. Could he do it? Could he take the leap? The decision weighed on him for days. Each morning, he woke up with the thought of the new opportunity looming in his mind. The job at the warehouse wasn't perfect, but it was secure. It felt safe. The idea of taking on more responsibility, of stepping into a leadership role, scared him. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that fear had been a constant companion in his life. It had kept him from moving forward, from reaching for things he had once thought were out of his grasp. Tom's old self, the man who had been afraid of failure, of making mistakes, wanted to hold on to what was comfortable. But the man he was becoming, the man who had learned to trust himself again, knew that this was the moment to take a chance. That evening, as he sat with Sarah in the break room, he finally found the courage to bring it up. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something," Tom began, his voice tentative. "Sure, what's going on?" she asked, looking up from her paperwork. "I've been offered a new position. It's a management role at a logistics company, and it's a big opportunity. But I'm not sure what to do." Sarah paused, studying him closely. "You've been offered a management position?" Tom nodded. "Yeah, and I'm torn. I don't want to leave here. I've learned a lot from you, and I've grown so much. But at the same time, I can't ignore that this is a chance to move up." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Tom, I think you've earned this. You've worked hard, and you've proven yourself over and over again. You have the potential to be a great leader. If you feel ready, I say go for it." Tom looked at her, the words sinking in. "But what about here? What about the team?" "I'll be honest," Sarah said. "We'll miss you. You've been a huge part of this team. But I've always believed in you, Tom. And if this is the opportunity you need to take your life to the next level, then I support you." Her words gave him the clarity he needed. The decision wasn't going to be easy. The warehouse had become a second home to him, and the people there had become a second family. But Sarah's encouragement reminded him that sometimes the hardest decisions were the ones that led to the most growth. "I appreciate everything you've done for me," Tom said, his voice thick with gratitude. "You've been more than just a manager. You've been a mentor." Sarah smiled warmly. "And you've become a friend, Tom. Whatever you decide, I know you'll do great things." The next day, Tom called Mark and told him he was ready to accept the offer. The decision didn't come without hesitation, but as he hung up the phone, he felt a surge of excitement. This was it. This was his next step. He wasn't just running from his past anymore. He was running toward a future he had never imagined. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. And as he walked through the warehouse one last time, he knew that while this chapter was closing, a new one was beginning. The morning Tom stepped into his new role felt surreal. He stood outside the logistics company's headquarters, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, but now that it was here, the weight of the responsibility was more tangible than ever before. The company was much larger than the warehouse he had worked at. It was bustling with activity, a stark contrast to the quieter, more familiar environment he had grown accustomed to. The office was sleek, modern, and filled with people moving at a fast pace, their eyes glued to computer screens, phones in hand, always in motion. Tom's first day was packed with meetings, introductions, and onboarding sessions. He was introduced to the team he would be managing, and as he shook hands with each person, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. These people had been in the industry for years. They knew the ins and outs of the business, and now he was their leader. He sat down at his new desk, a corner office with a window that overlooked the busy streets below. For a moment, he just stared out the window, taking in the view. It was a symbol of everything he had worked for, his past, his struggles, and his transformation. But it also felt like a reminder of how far he still had to go. That afternoon, he sat in his first leadership meeting. As the team discussed quarterly goals and strategies, Tom's mind raced. He felt out of place, like an imposter in a room full of experts. They spoke a language he wasn't fully fluent in: numbers, logistics, projections, and deadlines. He had never been a numbers guy. The technical side of the business was a lot more complex than he had anticipated. As the conversation continued, Tom found himself zoning out, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information. He had learned so much over the past year, but this felt like a whole new world. He was no longer just doing physical labor. He was responsible for people's success, for the flow of operations. He couldn't afford to make mistakes. Not this time. After the meeting, his boss, Rachel, a no-nonsense woman with sharp features and a commanding presence, pulled him aside. "Tom," she said, looking at him with a steady gaze, "I can tell you're a little overwhelmed, but don't worry. You're here because we believe you can handle this. Just take it one step at a time. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." "Thanks, Rachel," Tom replied, trying to steady his nerves. "I'll get the hang of it. I just don't want to let anyone down." Rachel gave him a nod of encouragement. "You won't. Just trust yourself." As the day went on, Tom found himself facing one challenge after another. He had to quickly learn how to manage a team of people who had been doing their jobs for years, longer than he had even been in the industry. And while they were polite, he could sense the skepticism in their eyes. They had no reason to believe in him yet. He was the new guy, the rookie who had somehow skipped over the years of experience they had. He spent the next few days shadowing his team, trying to understand their workflow, their struggles, and their goals. He learned quickly that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about listening, understanding, and offering support where it was needed. One morning, Tom sat down with a member of his team, Emily, who had been working at the company for over 5 years. She was skeptical of Tom's ability to lead, and he could feel the tension between them. "I'm not sure what you can bring to the table, Tom," she said bluntly, her arms crossed. "I've been here longer than you've been in this industry. I'm not sure what you're going to do that's going to change anything." Tom took a deep breath. This was the moment. He could either back down or stand up for what he believed in. "I may not have your experience, Emily," he said calmly, meeting her gaze, but I know what it's like to struggle. I've been on the bottom, and I've worked my way up. And I believe in this team. I believe in each of you, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you succeed. If you give me a chance, I'll do everything I can to make sure we all succeed together." For a moment, Emily didn't say anything. She just stared at him, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, her arms uncrossed, and she let out a small sigh. "All right," she said, her voice softer now. "I'll give you a shot, but don't expect me to go easy on you." Tom smiled. Fair enough. That conversation marked a turning point. Emily wasn't the only one who had doubts, but over time, he began to earn the respect of his team, one small step at a time. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't pretend to. What he did have was the drive to work hard, the humility to listen, and the determination to prove that he was capable of more than anyone had ever expected. As the weeks passed, Tom's confidence grew. He learned more about the logistics side of the business, worked on refining his leadership skills, and built stronger relationships with his team. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the pressure felt too great, but with each challenge he faced, he grew more resilient. One evening, as he wrapped up his work for the day, Tom sat back in his chair, taking a moment to reflect. The transformation he had undergone from the homeless man who asked Keanu Reeves for $1 to this moment felt almost unreal. He was leading a team. He was trusted with responsibility, and he was making a real impact. But even more than that, he realized something important. The journey wasn't just about achieving success. It was about staying true to himself, about the courage to step up and take chances, to keep pushing forward, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. And in that moment, he knew that he had truly earned his place here. He wasn't just a man who had overcome his past. He was a leader, someone who could guide others through their own challenges, and that was a responsibility he didn't take lightly. Tom's success in his new role hadn't come without challenges. The logistics company was fast-paced, and every day seemed to bring a new obstacle to overcome. But with each hurdle, Tom grew more confident in his leadership abilities. His team was beginning to trust him, and they worked together more cohesively. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly part of something bigger than himself. Yet, as Tom settled into his routine, another unexpected challenge presented itself, one that would force him to confront not just his professional goals, but his personal values. It started with a phone call on a Friday afternoon. Tom had just wrapped up a meeting with his team and was sitting at his desk when his phone buzzed. The number on the screen was from an unfamiliar area code. "Hello?" he answered, his voice calm but curious. "Tom, it's Mark again," the voice on the other end said. "I've got another opportunity for you, and this one is different." Tom's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard from Mark in a while, and he could tell from the tone of his voice that this wasn't a regular job offer. "What kind of opportunity?" Tom asked, trying to mask his excitement. He had just settled into this new role, but the idea of another opportunity, one that was different, piqued his interest. "It's a business venture," Mark explained. "A startup that's looking for someone to take charge of operations. They're offering a hefty salary and stock options. It's a chance to make a significant impact in a growing company. But the catch is, it's a risk. You'd be the one to lead the operations from the ground up." Tom leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't just another job offer. This was a chance to run his own show. The prospect of being the one in charge, making the big decisions, had always been a distant dream for him. But now, it was right in front of him. "I don't know," Tom said slowly. "I've only just started here. I'm still learning. This feels like a huge leap." "I understand," Mark replied. "But here's the thing. The job you have now, it's not a bad one. You're doing well. But if you want to build something bigger, something that could change your life, you need to take risks. This opportunity could be the one that pushes you to the next level." Tom ran a hand through his hair, weighing his options. He was finally comfortable in his role, gaining the respect of his team and his superiors. He had come so far. How could he walk away from the security of his current job? But then again, he thought about his past. The years he had spent scraping by, never believing that a better life was possible. Every moment in his journey had been a risk. Leaving his old life behind, taking that first job, accepting this management position, it had all been risks. And each time, he had come out stronger. This felt different, though. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about ambition. This was about choosing to take control of his future in a way he had never done before. "I'll need some time to think about it," Tom said, his voice quieter now, more contemplative. "It's a big decision." "I get it," Mark said. "Take your time. Just know that this could be a life-changing opportunity." After the call ended, Tom sat in his office, staring out the window once again. The view was almost the same as it had been months ago. Busy streets, cars honking, people rushing to and fro. But now, instead of feeling like an outsider, Tom saw it with a different perspective. He was part of this world now. He was making a difference. Yet, something about this new opportunity, something about starting his own venture, pulled at him. It was the chance to take everything he had learned and apply it in a completely new way. He had the chance to build a team from the ground up, to create something meaningful. But at what cost? He thought about Sarah, about the friends he had made at the warehouse, and about the people he had grown close to in his current company. If he took the new opportunity, he would be leaving everything behind again. The familiar faces, the sense of stability, the feeling of being part of something already established, gone in an instant. That night, Tom lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The decision wasn't about money. It wasn't even about status. It was about something deeper. The opportunity to build something of his own versus staying in a place where he had already established himself. His phone buzzed again. It was a text from Sarah. "Hey, just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You're doing amazing. Don't forget to keep believing in yourself, no matter what you choose." Tom stared at the message for a long time, the words echoing in his mind. Sarah had always been there for him, whether as a mentor or as a friend. She had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. And now, here she was, encouraging him to believe in his own abilities, no matter which path he chose. The next morning, Tom decided to go for a walk. He needed to clear his head. He walked for hours, through busy city streets and quiet parks, letting his thoughts wander. Every time he tried to focus on the new opportunity, he kept coming back to one thing. What did he truly want? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that it wasn't about the risk. It wasn't about how much money he could make or how big the venture could become. It was about who he wanted to be, the kind of person he wanted to become. Tom knew that, no matter which path he chose, he had to stay true to himself. He had already taken so many risks and had come so far. But this was different. This was the kind of risk that could change everything. And he wasn't sure he was ready to lose the stability he had worked so hard to build. That evening, he called Mark. "I've made my decision," Tom said, his voice firm. "I'm going to stay with the company. I've built something here, and I believe in the team I'm working with. Maybe someday I'll take that next step, but for now, this is where I belong." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Mark spoke. "I understand, Tom. You've got to follow your instincts. But don't forget, you've got more potential than you realize. When you're ready, that next step will be there." Tom hung up the phone and sat back in his chair, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. The decision wasn't easy, but he knew it was the right one. He was exactly where he needed to be. And now, he was ready to take on whatever came next, one step at a time. Tom's decision to stay with the logistics company wasn't just a choice about security. It was a reaffirmation of his commitment to growth, to pushing through the discomfort and challenges that had been a constant in his life. His path had never been about taking the easy route, and this decision wasn't going to be any different. In fact, he was about to face one of the hardest tests of his career. It had been 2 months since he made his decision to stay. Tom had found his rhythm in the company, but his role as manager came with a growing list of responsibilities, many of which were far more complex than he had originally anticipated. The company was expanding rapidly, and with that growth came new demands that Tom had never experienced before. His team had grown from a tight-knit group to a larger department, and with each new hire, there was more to manage, more to oversee. The paperwork was endless, the deadlines even tighter, and as the stakes grew, so did the pressure. One afternoon, Tom received a call from Rachel, his boss. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Tom, we need to talk. There's a major problem with our distribution center. We've been facing delays in shipments for the past week, and the client is furious. If we don't get it sorted, We could lose this contract. Tom's stomach sank. Delays meant disruptions in the flow of the business. And a lost client? That was a blow the company could ill afford. I'll take care of it, Tom said, his voice steady, but inside, he was beginning to feel the weight of the challenge. He had dealt with operational issues before, but this felt bigger, much bigger. Losing a major client wasn't just about missing targets. It was about the company's reputation, its future. You've got this, Rachel said before hanging up. As Tom made his way to the distribution center, his mind was already racing with possible solutions. He had spent enough time in logistics to know the flow of goods and operations like the back of his hand, but this wasn't just a technical issue. It was a leadership test. He had to keep his cool, make tough decisions, and find a solution that worked for everyone, even if it meant pushing his team harder than he ever had before. When he arrived at the distribution center, the chaos was evident. Warehouse workers were scrambling to meet orders, and there were multiple deliveries that had been left unfinished or were at risk of being delayed even further. Tom walked through the busy floor, taking in the scene, trying to assess the issue. He found Ryan, one of his team members, who had been working in the distribution center for over a year. Ryan was a solid worker, but his face looked stressed, and the frustration was clear in his eyes. "Hey, Ryan," Tom said, approaching him. "What's going on here? Why are we falling behind?" Ryan wiped his brow, looking exhausted. "We've had some issues with the new inventory system. It's slow, and it's been glitching. We can't get the products scanned and packed fast enough. And on top of that, we're short-staffed today." Tom nodded, taking in the information. He had heard about the new inventory system's glitches, but he hadn't realized it had gotten this bad. This was his first big test as a manager. He couldn't afford to let the problem slide. "All right," Tom said decisively. "We need a plan, and we need it fast. Let's split the team into two groups. One focused on getting the inventory sorted manually, and the other focused on packing the items we already have on hand. We'll prioritize the most urgent shipments. Ryan, I need you to coordinate with the tech team to troubleshoot the system. If we don't get it working, we'll need to look at temporary workarounds." Ryan gave a nod, his face softening slightly with a hint of relief. "Got it, Tom. We'll get to work right away." Tom set to work himself, checking in on every team member, offering guidance where it was needed, but also giving them the space to do their work. He felt the pressure building, but he also felt the quiet strength of his team coming together. There was something about working in crisis that brought out the best in them. Every person had a role to play, and they all had the same goal, to get the job done. As the hours passed, Tom kept a close eye on the clock. They were racing against time, but bit by bit, the chaos started to subside. The inventory glitches weren't fully fixed, but Ryan had found a temporary workaround that allowed the team to scan items manually. The packing team had made huge progress, and the most urgent shipments were on track to leave before the client's deadline. By the time evening fell, Tom knew they had saved the day. It wasn't perfect, but it was a victory in its own right. When he finally spoke with Rachel again, the relief in her voice was palpable. "Tom, you did it. I don't know how you pulled it off, but you kept the client happy. That's what matters." Tom felt a wave of exhaustion and pride wash over him. "It wasn't just me. The team pulled together. We made it work." Rachel paused. "That's the sign of a great leader, Tom. You brought them together. You kept them focused. And you made sure the job got done, even under pressure. I'm impressed." For the first time, Tom could feel the weight of leadership lifting off his shoulders. This wasn't just about solving problems. It was about how you handled them, how you led others through uncertainty, how you inspired them to push past their limits. The next few days went by in a blur. The chaos of the distribution center had been temporarily settled, but Tom's leadership was being tested in other ways. His team members started to come to him with more regularity, asking for advice or sharing concerns. He wasn't just managing operations anymore. He was also managing people, their frustrations, their aspirations, their doubts. It was tough. Some days, it felt like a struggle to balance everything. But with every challenge, Tom felt himself growing, stretching in ways he never thought possible. His past had been about survival, about getting by. But now, he was learning what it meant to lead, not just to get by, but to create something meaningful. That evening, As he reflected on everything that had happened, Tom felt a sense of accomplishment. He was no longer the guy who asked Keanu Reeves for $1. He was a manager, a leader. He had found his place in this company, not just as an employee, but as someone who could help shape its future. And as he looked ahead, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. As the weeks passed, Tom's life at the logistics company became increasingly demanding. There were late nights spent poring over reports, tense meetings with clients, and moments of doubt when things didn't go according to plan. But despite the constant pressure, he felt more secure in his role. He was earning respect not only from his team, but also from his superiors. Still, something nagged at him, a sense that he was sacrificing something important in the process. One Sunday afternoon, Tom decided to take a break from work and visit the park where he used to go when things felt overwhelming. It was a quiet, peaceful spot, far removed from the chaotic buzz of city life. As he sat on the park bench, watching children play and couples walk by, he let out a deep breath, hoping the calm would help him clear his mind. But it was then that he saw her, Sarah. She was sitting at a table near the cafe, reading a book with a hot coffee in hand. Her presence was both a surprise and a comfort, like a small reminder of the life he used to lead. The simplicity of days spent without the constant weight of responsibilities. Tom hesitated for a moment before walking over to her. It had been weeks since they last spoke outside of work. She had been a mentor, a friend, but their professional relationship had created a distance between them. He wondered if things had changed between them, if his shift in focus had affected their connection. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice a bit more hesitant than he had intended. She looked up, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Tom, I didn't expect to see you here. What's going on?" He sat down across from her, feeling a bit out of place in the calm of the park. "I just needed a break. Things have been intense at work lately." "I can imagine," she said, her smile fading slightly. "I know you've been working hard." Tom nodded, glancing down at his hands. "Yeah, I've been pushing myself. I feel like I've been juggling a lot lately, work, the team, everything. And honestly, I'm starting to feel like I'm losing touch with everything else." Sarah tilted her head, her expression softening. "What do you mean? Like, outside of work?" Tom ran a hand through his hair, unsure how to express the mix of emotions swirling inside him. "I guess I've been so focused on proving myself at the company, on keeping everything running smoothly, that I've lost sight of the other parts of my life. I haven't had time for friends, for anything that feels real, I guess. It's all become about work and numbers and deadlines." Sarah's eyes softened with understanding. "You're not the first person to feel that way. It's easy to get caught up in the grind, especially when you're trying to make a name for yourself. But I think you know that balance is key, right? You can't let work become your entire life. If you do, you'll burn out. You have to find time for yourself." Tom sighed, feeling the weight of her words. He had worked so hard to get where he was, to build a life that felt stable, to prove that he wasn't the same man he had been. But in doing so, he had neglected the very thing that had helped him get through his struggles in the first place. His connection to others, the relationships that made life more than just a job. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been so focused on this new role that I've distanced myself from people who care about me. I feel like I'm just moving from one task to the next, like everything I do is just to check off a box. I'm not sure where it's all leading." Sarah reached across the table, placing a hand on his. "Tom, it's okay to feel uncertain. It's okay to take a step back and reevaluate. You don't have to have everything figured out all the time." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of his thoughts settling over him. Tom realized that he had been so determined to build his career that he had sacrificed the very thing that had once driven him, the people and relationships that made life feel worthwhile. "I've been so focused on success," he said quietly, "that I haven't really thought about what I want outside of work. I've been chasing after a version of success that I'm not even sure I truly want." Sarah gave him a small smile. "It sounds like you're starting to figure that out, and that's a huge step. Maybe it's time to start thinking about what you need, not just what's expected of you. You've worked hard, Tom, but it's okay to take a step back and make sure you're doing it for the right reasons." Tom nodded, her words hitting him in ways he hadn't expected. He had been so focused on proving himself to others, on showing the world that he was capable of success, that he had forgotten to check in with himself. What did he truly want? What did he value? And where did his personal happiness fit into this fast-paced, success-driven world he had created? As the conversation continued, Sarah helped him to see things more clearly. She reminded him of the importance of taking care of himself, of remembering that life wasn't just about achieving goals. It was about enjoying the journey, too. "I think I've been running away from something," Tom said after a pause. "The fear of going back to the way I used to be, the man with nothing, struggling to survive. I've been so afraid of slipping back into that life that I've overcompensated. And now, I feel like I've lost myself in the process." Sarah smiled warmly. "I think the fact that you're recognizing this now is proof that you're not going back. You're just growing. You've learned from your past, and you're using it to shape who you are today. But you don't have to carry that weight forever. You've earned the right to take care of yourself, too." Tom looked out at the park, feeling a sense of clarity that had eluded him for weeks. He didn't need to give up on his career or his ambitions, but he needed to find balance. He needed to reconnect with the things that mattered to him outside of work, his friendships, his passions, and most importantly, his own sense of peace. As he stood up to leave, he turned to Sarah. "Thanks for this. I needed to hear it. You always seem to know just what to say." Sarah winked. "That's what friends are for, right?" Tom smiled. He had come to the park looking for clarity, and in that moment, he realized that he had found it. Not in the career he had worked so hard to build, but in the relationships he had let slip away. It wasn't too late to rebuild those connections. He wasn't just a manager, a leader, or an employee. He was a person with a life to live, and it was time to start living it. The following weeks brought a shift in Tom's perspective. After his conversation with Sarah, he became more conscious of the balance between his career and personal life. It wasn't an easy task, especially in a high-pressure job like his, but he made small, deliberate changes. He began carving out more time for himself. Whether it was a quiet walk through the park, a coffee with friends, or simply sitting down with a book in the evenings, it wasn't about quitting his job or stepping away from his ambitions. It was about recognizing that he didn't have to give up his humanity for success. He could have both career accomplishments and a meaningful life outside of work. However, as the months went on, Tom realized that his journey was not just about achieving success. It was about navigating the complexities of leadership, understanding his role within the company, and questioning the very nature of success itself. One particular day, as the sun began to set over the city skyline, Tom found himself faced with a decision that would define his future. The logistics company was expanding, and the higher-ups were looking to promote someone to the position of senior director. It was a big leap, one that would bring greater responsibility, a bigger paycheck, and more prestige. Tom had the qualifications. He had the results. And most importantly, he had the ambition. But as he sat in his office, staring at the promotion offer, something inside him began to stir. The weight of the decision felt heavier than he expected. His mind raced back to the conversation with Sarah. Was this promotion what he truly wanted? Or was it just the next logical step in a life that had been dictated by external expectations rather than internal desires? Tom knew what the promotion would bring. More stress, more hours, more sacrifice. Was that really the path he wanted to follow? He had worked hard to get to this point, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more to life than just climbing the corporate ladder. The sound of his phone buzzing broke his thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "Rachel, Tom, I wanted to congratulate you on the promotion offer. I know this is a big step for you. You've earned it, no question. But I also want to remind you that you don't have to take it. Take your time and think it through. I'm here if you need advice." Tom stared at the message for a moment. Rachel's words echoed in his mind. He had earned it. But what did he truly want? Did he want more titles, more pressure, more time away from the life he had started to reclaim? That night, Tom found himself back at the same park bench, the place where he had reflected on his life months ago. He had come full circle. He needed to figure out what mattered most to him. He couldn't keep living for the approval of others. It was time to look inward, to decide for himself what success really meant. The cool evening air blew softly around him, but the quiet was comforting. As he sat there, he began to realize something crucial. He didn't need to take the promotion to prove his worth. He had already proven it to himself. His mind wandered to his team at the logistics company. They had come so far together, and he felt a deep connection to them. He had worked hard to create a culture of support and trust, and the thought of leaving them behind for a more prestigious role felt wrong. It wasn't just about a paycheck. It wasn't about climbing to the top. It was about the relationships he had built, the people who had supported him, and the impact he could make in his current role. But there was still the part of him, the part that had always strived for more. It was a battle between ambition and fulfillment, between the drive to be at the top and the satisfaction of knowing he was already on a path that suited him. As Tom reflected on everything, he realized that this was the real turning point. He didn't need to chase after a promotion to feel successful. He could continue to grow, continue to lead, without constantly looking for external validation. His journey wasn't about reaching a certain title. It was about the way he chose to live his life every single day. In that moment of clarity, Tom made a decision. He would respectfully decline the promotion. He had found contentment in his current role. He had learned to find balance, to appreciate the small wins and the relationships that mattered most. It was a big decision, one that not everyone would understand, but it felt right. The next morning, Tom walked into the office, his mind made up. He called Rachel to let her know about his decision. "Rachel," he began, "I've thought about the promotion offer, and after a lot of reflection, I've decided to stay in my current role. I feel like I'm in the right place right now, and I want to continue growing with my team, not chasing after something that might take me away from what truly matters." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Rachel spoke. "Tom, I respect your decision. It takes a lot of courage to choose fulfillment over the typical corporate ladder climb. I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Rachel. I think I've finally figured out what success means to me." As the day went on, Tom felt lighter, more at peace. He had made a choice that was true to himself, and for the first time in a long time, he felt aligned with his values. The path ahead was still uncertain. There would always be challenges, and there would always be pressures to push harder, do more, achieve more. But Tom knew that the most important thing was that he was in control of his own journey. And so, with a newfound sense of clarity, Tom continued his work, leading his team with purpose and passion, knowing that the true measure of success wasn't about titles or accolades. It was about living in a way that felt authentic, fulfilling, and right for him. Tom's decision to decline the promotion was met with mixed reactions. Some colleagues were surprised, even confused, by his choice. Others, like Rachel, understood completely, admiring his commitment to personal fulfillment over climbing the corporate ladder. For Tom, though, it wasn't about justifying his decision to others. It was about understanding what felt right for him. Weeks passed, and his role as manager continued to evolve. He was more focused than ever on fostering a supportive, efficient environment for his team. The work wasn't easy, but it was meaningful, and he found great satisfaction in seeing his colleagues grow alongside him. Every success, big or small, felt like a shared victory. But even as he embraced his current position, Tom couldn't ignore the whispers of a bigger opportunity on the horizon. It started with a casual conversation at the company's annual retreat, held at a remote mountain lodge. As part of the event, employees from all levels were encouraged to network, share ideas, and collaborate on strategic initiatives. Tom didn't expect anything out of the ordinary until he found himself talking to David, the company's CEO. David was charismatic and well-connected, a man whose vision had helped the company grow into the powerhouse it was today. Over a casual drink, Tom mentioned his experiences managing the distribution team and the challenges that had come with rapid expansion. To his surprise, David was extremely interested in hearing more. "You've been doing a great job, Tom. I've been following your progress closely," David said, his tone friendly but direct. "The company's growth isn't slowing down anytime soon, and we're starting to look at ways to expand our leadership team. We need people like you who can manage chaos and keep things running smoothly." Tom listened, intrigued but wary. He had declined the promotion for a reason, and although David's praise was flattering, he wasn't sure if this was just another tempting distraction or a genuine opportunity. David continued, leaning forward. "There's an upcoming project that I think would be a great fit for you. We're looking at a new distribution model, something more innovative, more streamlined. It's going to be a game changer for us. But I need someone who can think outside the box, who isn't afraid to take risks. I'm talking about leading the charge, Tom. A bigger role. What do you think? The words hung in the air between them. Tom felt a surge of excitement mixed with hesitation. This wasn't just a typical promotion. It was a new venture, an opportunity to shape the future of the company. But the thought of leading such a high-stakes project also filled him with apprehension. Was this the right moment to push himself further? Was this the type of challenge he wanted? Or would it take him away from everything he had worked so hard to balance? David seemed to sense his hesitation and gave him a reassuring smile. Take some time to think about it. I know this isn't a decision to be made on the spot, but the door is open. Let me know if you're interested. Tom nodded, trying to mask the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. As the evening went on, he found himself thinking more about the offer than anything else. The prospect of taking on a project that would challenge him, stretch his limits, and ultimately shape the future of the company was undoubtedly tempting. But what did that mean for his life outside of work? He'd spent so long focused on creating a stable balance in his life, between work, relationships, and self-care. Was he ready to throw that balance into chaos for a new opportunity? Would he risk everything he had worked for in pursuit of something even bigger? The next morning, as the retreat came to an end, Tom spent some time alone, reflecting on the conversation with David. He thought about his team, the people he had grown to care for, the sense of camaraderie that had helped them overcome countless obstacles. He thought about how, just months earlier, he had been at a crossroads, questioning whether he could keep up with the demands of his job and his life. And now, here was an opportunity that could propel him forward even further. But at what cost? As he walked through the scenic trails near the lodge, Tom knew he needed to make a decision that was in line with his true priorities. He couldn't just accept this opportunity because it sounded appealing on the surface. He needed to figure out if it fit into his bigger picture. That evening, Tom called Rachel. He valued her input more than anyone else at the company, and she had been a steady guide throughout his journey. After giving her the rundown of the conversation with David, he asked her bluntly, "What do you think? Should I take the leap?" Rachel was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Tom, you've worked hard to get to where you are. You've learned a lot, and you've built something special with your team. This opportunity is a huge one, but you need to ask yourself, what do I really want? It's not just about what's next in your career. It's about how you want to live your life." Her words resonated deeply. Tom realized that he had been focusing so much on external validation, whether it was promotions or achievements, that he hadn't truly thought about the deeper question. What did he want his life to look like moving forward? By the time Tom arrived home, he had made up his mind. He wasn't going to rush into a decision, but he wasn't going to shy away from an opportunity just because it made him uncomfortable. The key was balance. It was about making choices that supported both his professional growth and his personal happiness. The next morning, he called David and set up a meeting. As they sat down in David's office, Tom was calm, but resolute. "I appreciate the offer," Tom began, "and I'm excited about the vision you have for the company. However, after careful consideration, I've decided that I'm going to stay in my current role for now. I've worked hard to create something here with my team, and I want to continue growing with them. But I also want to maintain the balance I've found in my personal life." David looked at him thoughtfully. "I respect that, Tom. It's clear you've put a lot of thought into this. If you ever change your mind, the door is always open." Tom smiled. "I'm sure we'll find new ways to collaborate. But for now, I'm exactly where I need to be." Walking out of the office, Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew there would always be new opportunities, new challenges. But the most important thing was that he was choosing a path that aligned with who he was becoming, not just who others expected him to be. And with that, Tom felt confident that the right opportunities would come when the time was right, without sacrificing the things that truly mattered to him. The weeks following Tom's decision to stay in his current role were some of the most fulfilling he had experienced in a long time. The weight of the corporate pressures that had once felt suffocating now seemed more manageable. He wasn't avoiding challenges, but he had found a way to face them with a clearer sense of purpose. His decision to prioritize balance, rather than chase after a title, gave him a sense of peace he hadn't realized he was missing. At work, things were moving forward. Tom's team continued to perform well, with several projects successfully launched and others on track. He spent more time mentoring his colleagues, taking a genuine interest in their personal growth as much as their professional achievements. This shift from being solely focused on the next big step to being more present with those around him made all the difference. He could see the impact it had on the morale and engagement of his team, and it was gratifying to witness their success. However, just as Tom was settling into this new rhythm, something unexpected happened, something that would push him to reevaluate everything once again. It came in the form of an email late one Thursday afternoon. The subject line read, "Exclusive offer, a leadership summit invitation." Tom clicked on it with curiosity, reading through the invitation. The email was from an exclusive leadership development organization that specialized in offering tailored programs for executives and senior leaders across industries. They had been monitoring Tom's progress over the years and had identified him as someone they believed could benefit from attending their upcoming leadership summit, a gathering of some of the most influential minds in the business world. As he read through the details, Tom felt a surge of excitement, but also a twinge of hesitation. The summit promised incredible networking opportunities, access to top-tier leadership coaches, and sessions on cutting-edge strategies for running a successful business. It seemed like the kind of event that could offer the kind of insights and experiences he had been craving. A chance to elevate his leadership skills, connect with like-minded professionals, and expand his horizons. But as the excitement waned, the weight of his decisions settled in. Was this just another opportunity to jump into the fast lane? Was he looking for external validation again, seeking approval from the high-powered world of top executives? Or did he genuinely believe this would help him grow in ways that were aligned with his personal values? Tom sat back in his chair, reflecting on everything he had learned over the past several months. He had spent so much time focusing on external markers of success, promotions, awards, recognition, and he had come to understand that while these were fulfilling in some ways, they didn't define his happiness. True fulfillment, he realized, came from the inside out. From the relationships he nurtured, the sense of purpose he found in his work, and the balance he had created in his life. Yet, Tom also knew that growth didn't stop just because he had found balance. If he wanted to evolve as a leader, as a person, he needed to continue challenging himself. The key was finding opportunities that would stretch him, not just professionally, but personally as well. With this in mind, Tom reached out to Rachel for advice. She had been a sounding board throughout his journey, and her wisdom had been invaluable when it came to navigating the complexities of leadership. "Rachel, I've been invited to this leadership summit," Tom explained over the phone. "It's an incredible opportunity, but I'm torn. Part of me wants to go, to learn and connect with others, but I don't want to fall back into the trap of chasing titles and external recognition." Rachel's response was thoughtful, as always. "Tom, you've come a long way. You've learned that balance is key, and that true success isn't just about climbing the ladder. But personal growth doesn't have to come at the expense of your well-being. If you believe this summit will help you grow in a meaningful way, one that aligns with your values, then go for it. Just make sure you're going for the right reasons." Her words were a turning point for Tom. It wasn't about the summit itself. It was about whether it fit into his vision of personal and professional growth. If he saw it as an opportunity to deepen his knowledge and become a more effective, authentic leader, then it could be a positive step. But he needed to stay grounded in the reasons why he was pursuing it. After much consideration, Tom decided to accept the invitation. He would go to the summit, not as a way to prove anything to anyone, but as a way to continue learning and evolving. It wasn't a rejection of his balanced approach to life. It was an extension of it. This was about growth, but not at the cost of his well-being or personal values. The summit took place in a luxurious resort tucked away in the mountains, surrounded by breathtaking views of snow-capped peaks and serene forests. It was a far cry from the busy city streets Tom had grown used to. As he arrived, he felt a mix of excitement and nerves. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew this would be a place for deep reflection and connection with some of the brightest minds in leadership. Over the next several days, Tom participated in workshops, leadership sessions, and one-on-one coaching. He met entrepreneurs, CEOs, and innovators from various industries, each with their own unique challenges and successes. He was struck by the diversity of their experiences, and yet, the themes of leadership, self-awareness, and authenticity ran through every conversation. There were moments when Tom felt a sense of awe, seeing firsthand the power of visionary leaders, hearing their stories of perseverance, and learning from their triumphs and failures. But there were also moments of quiet reflection when Tom realized that the lessons he was learning were not just about being a better leader. They were about being a better person, understanding himself, his motivations, and his true desires. By the end of the summit, Tom had gained invaluable insights. He had learned new strategies, forged meaningful connections, and even discovered new ways to approach the challenges his team faced back at the logistics company. But most importantly, he had gained clarity about what it meant to lead with authenticity, purpose, and integrity. As he left the summit, Tom felt more confident than ever in his path. He knew there would always be opportunities that tested his commitment to balance, but now he understood how to approach them in a way that honored his values. He wasn't just a manager or a leader. He was a person who was continually growing, both professionally and personally. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Tom was excited for what it held. The weeks after the leadership summit passed in a whirlwind, Tom returned to work feeling reinvigorated, with fresh ideas and a clearer sense of purpose. He had learned so much, not only from the industry leaders at the summit, but from himself as well. He was ready to bring his new insights to the table, ready to lead in a way that felt true to his vision. But life, as it often does, threw him another curveball. It started with an unexpected email from upper management one Friday morning. It was an urgent request for a meeting, marked with an all-caps subject line, "Immediate attention required. Crisis in distribution." Tom's stomach churned as he clicked open the message. The details were brief but concerning. A new logistics partner had failed to meet expectations, causing a significant backlog in the supply chain. The company was facing the potential for delays that could result in lost revenue, disgruntled clients, and a tarnished reputation. As Tom read through the email, he could feel the pressure mounting. This wasn't just another issue to resolve. It was a crisis that could affect the company's long-term growth. And with David's recent comments about promoting strong leaders who could manage chaos, Tom knew this was a test. The meeting, scheduled for the afternoon, was attended by a small group of senior managers. Tom walked into the room, where a sea of tense faces awaited him. At the head of the table sat David, who wasted no time getting to the point. "We have a major problem," David said, looking directly at Tom. "We've been working with this new logistics partner for months, and now we're facing an unprecedented delay. If we don't fix this quickly, we risk losing valuable clients. Tom, I'm counting on you to lead the charge and get this sorted out." Tom nodded, his heart racing. It was exactly the type of high-pressure situation he had wanted to avoid. But this wasn't about avoiding challenges. It was about how he approached them. He took a deep breath, suppressing the anxiety that threatened to bubble to the surface. "I understand the urgency," he said, standing up. "First, we need to assess the scope of the issue. We don't want to make any hasty decisions that could cause further complications." The room fell quiet as Tom laid out a plan. He suggested working closely with the logistics team, identifying where the breakdown had occurred, and creating a step-by-step action plan to address the backlog. He emphasized the importance of communication, both internally and with clients, to keep everyone updated. And most importantly, he proposed that the company look at long-term solutions to ensure something like this didn't happen again. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a start, one that showed his team he was taking ownership without losing sight of the bigger picture. As the meeting progressed, Tom felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He knew there was no guarantee the situation would resolve smoothly, but he had confidence in his ability to lead his team through the storm. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and quick decision-making. Tom worked tirelessly, collaborating with logistics experts and making tough choices to minimize the damage. Despite the overwhelming pressure, he stuck to the principles he had learned: communication, clarity, and a steady hand. As the situation unfolded, Tom was surprised by the level of support he received from his team. They rallied behind him, offering solutions, brainstorming ideas, and working overtime to meet the company's needs. He had worked hard to create a culture of trust and mutual respect, and in this moment, it paid off. They weren't just following his lead, they were actively contributing to the solution. By the end of the week, Tom's team had successfully cleared the backlog. They had managed to secure new delivery timelines with clients and had even negotiated terms with the logistics partner to avoid future disruptions. The crisis, while not completely without consequence, had been handled with a professionalism that left the company's leadership impressed. David was the first to commend Tom for his handling of the crisis. "You did an excellent job, Tom," David said during their debrief. "This could have been a disaster, but you kept your cool, focused on the solution, and led your team to success. I'm proud of you." Tom smiled, but the praise felt different this time. It wasn't about the external recognition. It was about how he felt in that moment. He had faced a crisis, kept his integrity intact, and led with a sense of purpose. He had proved to himself that he was capable of handling even the toughest situations without losing sight of his values. That night, as Tom sat on the couch at home, he thought about everything he had gone through. The crisis had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated, but it had also shown him the power of staying grounded. It had reminded him that leadership wasn't about handling every challenge alone. It was about bringing people together, finding solutions, and staying true to the values that guided him. He thought about the balance he had worked so hard to achieve in his life. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when the pressures of his job threatened to pull him off course. But moments like this, when he faced adversity with clarity and purpose, reminded him that he was on the right path. Tom had learned that challenges were inevitable. What mattered most was how he responded to them. And as he looked ahead, he felt more confident than ever that he could face whatever came his way, without losing himself in the process. After the whirlwind of the crisis and the subsequent resolution, things settled down for Tom at work. The dust had finally settled, and the company was back on track. However, while the sense of relief was palpable, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting inside him. The leadership summit, the crisis, and the moments of reflection that followed had opened his eyes to new possibilities. He wasn't just looking at the next promotion or milestone anymore. He was searching for something deeper, something that would keep him aligned with his personal values and sense of purpose. As weeks passed, Tom became more intentional about the kind of work he wanted to pursue. He began to reassess his professional trajectory, asking himself questions he hadn't thought to ask in a long time. Was he truly fulfilled in his current role? Was there more he could do to align his work with his passions? How could he use his skills and experience to make a larger impact, not just within the company, but in the world around him? It wasn't long before Tom's thoughts turned to a new possibility, a leadership position that focused not just on logistics, but on sustainability, an area that had been growing rapidly within his industry. Tom had always been passionate about environmental causes, having grown up in a family that emphasized the importance of taking care of the planet. But it wasn't something he had pursued actively in his career, believing that his work in logistics and supply chain management was already making a significant impact. Now, however, with the world changing and the growing importance of sustainable business practices, he felt a new calling. He started researching companies that were at the forefront of sustainability in logistics, reading case studies, and reaching out to people in his network who were working in this space. The more he learned, the more he realized that this was an area where he could make a meaningful difference. He could take everything he had learned about leadership, problem-solving, and logistics and apply it to a cause that mattered deeply to him. One afternoon, as Tom sat in his office, poring over a sustainability report from one of the leading companies in the field, he received an email from a former colleague, Megan, who worked in a sustainability-focused division of a global logistics company. She had been following his progress and reached out with an intriguing opportunity. "Hey Tom, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to let you know that there's a new role opening up here that I think could be a great fit for you. We're looking for someone with your experience to help lead our logistics sustainability initiative. It's a high-impact role, and we need someone who can drive real change. I think you'd be perfect for it." Tom sat back in his chair, staring at the email. The opportunity seemed almost too perfect. It was the kind of role that aligned with both his professional expertise and personal passion. He had often daydreamed about combining his logistics experience with his desire to contribute to a more sustainable world, and now, here it was in front of him. But as excited as he was about the possibility, Tom didn't jump in immediately. He had learned from his previous experiences that decisions like these needed to be carefully considered. He took a couple of days to reflect, weighing the pros and cons. Could this new role allow him to continue growing as a leader while still maintaining the balance he had worked so hard to create? What impact could he truly have, and was he prepared to take on the challenges that would come with this new responsibility? During his reflection, Tom had several conversations with people who had been influential in his journey: Rachel, his old mentor from the Leadership Summit, and even his colleagues back at his current company. They all supported his exploration of the opportunity, emphasizing that growth often came from taking risks and pursuing passions that might not always fit into the neatly defined career path he had been following. After much consideration, Tom made his decision. He would take the plunge and apply for the role. The idea of leading a sustainability initiative in logistics excited him, and he realized that this was the challenge he had been looking for. It wasn't about the prestige or the title. It was about aligning his work with his deeper values and making an impact that mattered. The interview process was intense, but Tom felt prepared. He was no longer just the manager who was working his way up the corporate ladder. He was someone who had a clear understanding of his purpose, who had faced his own fears and doubts and come out stronger on the other side. As he sat down with the hiring team, he spoke with conviction about his experience, his passion for sustainability, and his vision for how logistics could be reimagined to create positive environmental change. A few weeks later, Tom received the call he had been waiting for. He had been offered the position. As he hung up the phone, a mix of excitement and nervousness washed over him. This was a new chapter, a bold new direction, but it also meant stepping out of his comfort zone once again. He was leaving behind the familiar, the team he had built, and the environment where he had spent so much of his career. But he knew that this was the right move for him. It was a chance to lead in a way that aligned with his values, and in doing so, make a real difference. That evening, as Tom sat down for dinner with his family, he shared the news. His wife, Lily, smiled with pride as she listened to his excitement. "I knew this was coming," she said, gently squeezing his hand. "You've always talked about making a difference. I think this is your chance to do just that." Tom nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. He realized, in that moment, that he wasn't just taking a new job. He was stepping into a future that was more aligned with who he was and who he wanted to become. The path ahead wasn't guaranteed, and there would be challenges to face, but Tom was ready. He had come a long way from the unsure man who had once feared losing everything. Now, he was a leader who knew that embracing change was the key to growth. And as the days passed, and Tom began to prepare for his new role, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about the next chapter of his career. It was about living a life that mattered, about creating a legacy of leadership that was both effective and meaningful. The future, with all its uncertainties, was now something Tom was eager to embrace. Tom's first few months in the new role were an intense whirlwind. As he settled into his position, he quickly realized the scale of what he had taken on. Leading a sustainability initiative at a global logistics company wasn't just about tweaking existing practices. It was about fundamentally shifting how the entire company viewed its environmental footprint. The scope of the work was vast. Tom found himself immersed in meetings with departments across the company, collaborating with engineers, supply chain managers, and sustainability experts. The goal was clear: reduce carbon emissions, minimize waste, and transition to more sustainable resources without compromising efficiency or profitability. It wasn't an easy task, but it was one that Tom felt passionately about. His days were filled with brainstorming sessions, strategy meetings, and site visits to assess the current operations. He worked closely with the team to develop long-term sustainability goals, including transitioning to electric vehicles, optimizing routes to reduce fuel consumption, and implementing eco-friendly packaging solutions. It was a challenge, but it was one that excited him. For the first time in his career, he felt like he was part of something bigger, something that would have a lasting impact. Despite the passion driving him, Tom couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility. There were moments of doubt, particularly when he encountered resistance from certain stakeholders who were more focused on the immediate costs of sustainability initiatives than the long-term benefits. Some were skeptical about how these changes would affect the company's bottom line, while others simply didn't see the urgency. At times, Tom felt the pressure of balancing the environmental goals with the practical realities of the business. There were instances when he had to make difficult compromises, sacrificing a bit of idealism for the sake of practicality. But what kept him grounded was his belief that every small change, every shift towards sustainability, mattered. It wasn't about achieving perfection overnight. It was about making progress. One of the most challenging moments came during a critical project proposal that would have required a significant upfront investment in new technologies to improve the supply chain's energy efficiency. The project was ambitious, involving a complete overhaul of several of the company's core systems, and it was clear that it would take time before the financial benefits would be realized. In a boardroom meeting to discuss the proposal, Tom found himself facing a sea of skeptical faces. David, who had always been a strong advocate for innovation, remained neutral, but others questioned whether the company could afford such a large investment, especially when the market was unpredictable. "Tom, I respect your passion for sustainability," one senior executive said, "but we're in a competitive industry. Can we really afford to divert so much money to this right now? What if it takes years before we see a return?" Tom felt a familiar sense of pressure. This was a make-or-break moment. He had to convince the board that the long-term benefits outweighed the immediate costs. Drawing on everything he had learned over the years, he took a deep breath and responded. "I understand the concern," Tom began, "but the reality is that we're already seeing increased pressure from both consumers and regulators to adopt sustainable practices. Companies that ignore these changes will be left behind. This investment isn't just about improving efficiency. It's about positioning ourselves as leaders in the industry. In the long term, these changes will save us money, improve our reputation, and ensure we're meeting the demands of the future." He continued, outlining the financial projections and the long-term environmental benefits of the project. He emphasized that it was an investment in the company's future, one that would help them stand out in a competitive market. The room remained quiet as the board members processed his words. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, David spoke up. "I agree with Tom," he said. "This is a critical opportunity for us to not only lead in sustainability, but also to ensure we're ahead of the curve. Let's move forward with it." The decision was made. Tom left the meeting feeling a sense of relief, but also a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about implementing policies. It was about shifting mindsets, aligning the company's goals with a sustainable future, and making a bold statement that they were ready to lead in an evolving world. As the weeks passed, Tom's confidence grew. He had already begun seeing positive results. The first steps of the project were underway, and the company's efforts were starting to attract attention from clients and industry leaders who were eager to partner with an organization that was prioritizing sustainability. Slowly but surely, the company's culture was shifting, and Tom could feel the momentum building. But even with the victories, Tom knew there was much more to be done. This was just the beginning. The road ahead was long and filled with challenges, but it was a road he was eager to travel. He was no longer just working to climb the corporate ladder. He was working toward a vision that was bigger than himself, one that aligned with his values and passions. One evening, as Tom walked through the company's newly renovated office building, he found himself reflecting on his journey. A few years ago, he would never have imagined that he would be in this position, leading a global initiative on sustainability, helping to shape the future of the industry. He had come so far from the man who was struggling to find balance in his life. And yet, despite all the external successes, it was the internal shift that mattered most. He had found purpose. As Tom looked out the window, taking in the city skyline, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road ahead was still uncertain, filled with obstacles and moments of doubt. But now, more than ever, Tom knew that he was on the right path. The future was wide open, and it was his to shape. It had been nearly a year since Tom had taken on his new role leading the company's sustainability initiatives. The company had made tremendous strides, reducing its carbon footprint, optimizing supply chains, and becoming a leader in sustainable logistics. What had once seemed like an ambitious dream was now becoming a reality. Yet, Tom knew that success wasn't just measured in metrics or milestones. It wasn't even about the environmental impact, though that remained central to everything he did. What mattered most to him was the people he worked with, the team he had built, and the culture he had helped shape. It was the legacy of leadership he was leaving behind. In many ways, the past year had been a test, one that challenged his abilities as a leader and his values as a person. There had been moments of doubt, times when the weight of responsibility felt too much to bear, and others when failure seemed imminent. But through it all, Tom had learned that leadership was never about having all the answers. It was about guiding others through uncertainty, inspiring them to do their best, and learning from each setback along the way. As the company moved toward its next phase of sustainability goals, Tom found himself reflecting on the path that had brought him here. It had been a journey full of twists and turns, one that had taken him from his early days in the logistics industry to a place where he could truly make a difference. It wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder anymore. It was about the impact he could have on the world around him. One of the most rewarding parts of this journey had been seeing the changes in the people around him. When he first joined the company, many of his colleagues were skeptical about sustainability, unsure of how it would affect their day-to-day work. But over time, Tom had seen a shift in mindset. People were no longer just following orders. They were taking ownership of the changes, suggesting new ideas, and becoming passionate advocates for sustainability themselves. He had also made a point of mentoring younger employees, especially those who had the same drive he had once felt, ambitious, but uncertain of how to navigate their careers. Tom made it a priority to guide them, offering not only his expertise, but also his experiences, sharing the lessons he had learned along the way. "I don't have all the answers," he'd tell them, "but I've learned that the key to leadership is staying true to your values and always striving to do what's right. People will follow you if they see that you care, not just about the company, but about them as individuals." Tom's influence wasn't limited to his own team. The sustainability initiative had sparked a broader movement within the company, with departments across the organization now considering their environmental impact. Even the sales and marketing teams had begun incorporating sustainability into their pitches, seeing it as not just a trend, but a fundamental shift in consumer demand. He had started something bigger than himself, a movement that had rippled through the company and beyond, into their partners, suppliers, and clients. It was a change in mindset, a shift toward a future where business success wasn't just about profits, but about creating value for the planet and its people. But despite the success, Tom couldn't help but feel the pull of something new on the horizon. His work at the company was far from finished, but he had begun to think about the next phase of his journey. There were still so many challenges in the world, so many industries that needed transformation, so many communities that needed support. And while Tom was deeply committed to his current role, he knew that his leadership could have an even broader impact. One afternoon, Tom found himself sitting at a local cafe, scrolling through emails when an unexpected message popped up. It was from the board of a nonprofit organization focused on global sustainability efforts. The message was an invitation to speak at their annual conference, sharing his experience in leading change within a global corporation. At first, Tom hesitated. He had always kept a relatively low profile, focusing on his work rather than seeking the spotlight. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was an opportunity to influence an even wider audience, one that could amplify the message of sustainability and responsible business practices. He accepted the invitation, agreeing to speak at the conference and share the lessons he had learned. As he prepared his speech, Tom took a moment to reflect on everything that had led him here, from his early struggles to the many triumphs and setbacks along the way. He realized that leadership wasn't about titles or accolades. It was about the ability to inspire others to become the best version of themselves, to help them grow and find their own sense of purpose. On the day of the conference, Tom stood before an audience of hundreds, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and activists, all gathered to discuss the future of sustainability. He wasn't just speaking about his company's achievements. He was speaking about the importance of creating a world where business success and environmental stewardship could go hand in hand. As he looked out over the crowd, Tom felt a deep sense of gratitude. His journey had brought him to this moment, and now it was time to share everything he had learned. But it wasn't about him. It was about the future and the impact each person in that room could have. "Leadership isn't about having all the answers," Tom said, his voice steady and confident. "It's about having the courage to take risks, to challenge the status quo, and to inspire others to do the same. If we want to build a better world, it's going to take all of us, working together, leading with purpose, and staying true to what we believe in. As the audience applauded, Tom felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had experienced before. It wasn't the recognition or the praise that mattered. It was the knowledge that he had created something lasting, a movement, a culture, a legacy that would continue long after his time at the company. As he walked off the stage, Tom smiled to himself. The journey had been long, and there were still challenges ahead. But he had come full circle, learning, growing, and finally understanding what true leadership meant. And in that moment, he knew that he had built more than just a career.